Okay, so here is, I kind of wanted to research this theory of gentle parenting. I'll get more into detail about what that kind of entails later on in the presentation. But basically, I just created a survey through Qualtrics about like 17, 18 questions, and I sent it out through a group message here at Clemson to my fellow peers to kind of get more understanding of kind of how their childhood was in regards to how they were raised and the kind of parenting styles they experienced. So I started off with this quote I found from a mom blogger that I follow and really admire. She always says that she follows this quote, and it says, "If I had to choose to make a general rule for living and working with children, it would be this. Be wary of saying or doing anything to a child that you would not do to another adult whose good opinion and affection you value." This kind of started a basis of this project, in that I think a lot of times children are often looked as inferior rather than as an equal in a family home. And I wanted to kind of research more on the kind of the gentle parenting styles that John Holt talks about as well. This is another quote I found really interesting. "So often children are punished for being human. They aren't allowed to have grumpy moods, bad days, disrespectful tones, or bad attitudes, yet we adults have them all the time. We think if we don't stop it now, we will lose control, but let go of that unfound fear and give your child permission to be human." I think this is a huge quote and super important, and kind of setting the tone for this research project that I did. Again, I can't agree with this more. And I also think that another quote, "Children are people now, they don't grow up to be children." And I think a lot of times, again, they're looked at as younger, and that means inferior. And I think that there really should be a balance between a parent and a child, and have kind of more of a partnership rather than a dictatorship in a family home. So here I kind of created a little visual for you. Here my independent variable is obviously gentle parenting styles, and then my dependent variable is the amount of empathy a child holds. I'm kind of testing whether or not this gentle parenting style has effect on how much empathy a child holds, how sensitive they are to people's emotions, that kind of thing. Obviously, like, my mediator here is going to be outside lifestyle factors, and my moderator will be a family balance. In general, the relationship between gentle parenting styles, the amount of empathy a child holds, depends on whether or not every day outside factors like schooling, finances, strength of marriage, disciplinary actions are approached with an open mind and a healthy family balance. Because I know there are other things that kind of influence how people parent, and it's not just something simple as like, oh, do this and your child will be great. It's a lot of things that come into play when raising a home. Here's just a really simple equation. Here my y is the amount of empathy held by a child, is obviously, what we're testing. And then parental style, it's kind of our constant here, because regardless of what parental style that people choose to do, their child will be affected by it. So that's kind of the constant here. And then obviously the family balance is affected by outside factors. It's easy to say that parental style just affects it entirely, but there are so many other things that affect how a child is raised and how a parent raises their children, other than just, again, simple everyday tasks that they do. So some scales I have here, I had general questions about whether or not, like your age, your gender, your race. I just wanted to get kind of that basic demographic information out the way. Here I put on the screen kind of what I focused on. Here are some questions I have, basically talking about how many siblings they have, how many parents or guardians were active in the household towards raising them, if they were allowed to express their feelings about situations, if they received rewards, they practiced self-soothing, which basically means they were basically cried themselves to sleep. Unwanted behavior was either discipline with either physical or isolated consequences, which is like timeout, spanking, yelling, sent to room, that kind of thing. If they were given choices, not commands, if their feelings were quickly pushed aside because they wanted to focus on the consequences first, or if they were focused on their emotions first and then address the consequences later. If they were forced to show affection when they didn't want to, and then if the parents made sure to take time for themselves, and then basically an overall consensus if they thought that their parents practiced gentle parenting or non-gentle parenting. I kind of ended the survey with these 3 questions. I got this idea from you, Professor G. Basically, there's some psychology research determining that more empathetic people tend to read people's emotions better than those who are not as empathetic. So I wanted to test to see if gentle parenting had the same effect on that. So basically, I had people have 4 pictures, and I had 3 different emotions that they were supposed to determine which eyes portrayed, and worrisome, fantasizing, and calm were some of the 3, and I'll get into more how those kind of results came, and it's really interesting to see how gentle parenting has a relationship with those as well. So participants were, again, they were college-age students, so they had to be from like 18 to 22, so that's born between 1997 and 2001. I just had a straightforward question about, again, I just said, what year were you born in, and then they answered. I had male or female, just because I wanted to make sure that it was both men and women, because I know that sometimes gender is affected when you're raising a child. They all attended Clemson University just because I know them personally, and I sent them through a group message. There were multiple races, white, Asian, black, and they either came from a single or a married family home, because I know that those two things, culture's different and values differ, and again, coming from a single or married family home definitely affects how you were raised as well. So here's kind of a summary of I'll get kind of into each summary so far. So you can see here it was 50-50 for self-soothing. Why that is, again, my data can't tell me that exactly. I'm sure there's some reason behind it, but basically a gentle parenting style believes that you do not self-soothe, that the child obviously needs something if it's crying, and you are to, kind of tend to their emotions and their needs. Summary of feelings. So this is basically means that, again, were they able to express their feelings to their parents? And, I feel like most people can say yes, and that kind of came here too. 70% said that they did feel like they could go to their parents with their feelings, and then some did not. And then rewards. This is pretty interesting. 60% said that they were given rewards, whether it was like ice cream or candy for doing something good, and then there were some people that said they didn't. And I'll get to more detail of why that is considered non-gentle for giving rewards out. Basically, if their feelings were pushed to the side and then they focus on the consequences. So if a child was doing something wrong or bad, the parent immediately discussed the consequences and then address their feelings. I would say that 60% of the participants recorded that their feelings were pushed to the side, and their non-gentle were not pushed to the side. I totally messed it up. I'm sorry. Gentle, their feelings were not pushed to the side. So that means that they, again, addressed their feelings first and then dealt with the consequences. And then non-gentle would be that they were basically disciplined right away and then talked about it later. Summary of choices. This is kind of interesting too. Again, gentle believes that you give a child a choice. You don't give them choices, not commands. Like, oh, go brush your teeth. You would more ask, would you like to brush your teeth before or after you put on your pajamas? It's still getting the job done, and it still needs to be done. But you're giving the child an option to kind of make a choice and be responsible for something so simple as brushing their teeth. Summary of discipline is I kind of figured this result would happen. 6% said that they experienced, again, spanking, yelling, timeouts, that kind of physical or isolated consequences. That is not considered a gentle parenting style, and I'll get into more detail about that later. But yes, majority said that they experienced non-gentle parenting styles for that one. Alone time as an adult, so gentle here would be, again, these parents or one parent takes time for themselves. That's crucial in raising a child and crucial for your own energy and your own peace for yourself as a parent. So 60% said that their parents did take time for themselves, and then 40% said they did not. And again, there's other factors that go into that. Summary of forced affection. This is pretty interesting too. 60% said that they were forced to give affection, and 40% said they were not forced to give affection. And this also means like forced to say thank you, forced to say or give hugs and kisses, bye, that kind of thing. That's considered forced affection. And again, I'll get into more detail about what's considered gentle and what's not considered gentle more in the conclusions later on. Emotions first. So this is if they addressed their emotions first, or if they did not. And 6% said that their emotions were addressed first, and then consequences followed. And then 40% said they were addressed with consequences first. The overall evaluation, I just basically had a semantic scale from 1 to 9, and I said overall I would rate my childhood / parenting styles, my parents' practice as gentle versus non-gentle, and I described what gentle was and I described what non-gentle was. And 60% said that they experienced gentle parenting, and then 40% said they experienced non-gentle parenting. So with the eye test, this is what kind of I found so far. So again, this is one of the tests I had where you had to describe an emotion, and this is for worrisome. Here, the correct answer is the second picture. Out of the first picture, those who voted 7 on the scale of believing that they had a gentle parenting style being raised from, they had the highest percentage choosing the first picture. And then for the second picture, those who voted highest also had highest percent of choosing the correct answer. So the second picture here is the correct answer. And that also had the highest percentage of people choosing it that also chose that they experienced gentle parenting. The third picture, which is the farthest from the correct answer, again, the study that I got is from the New York Times, and they kind of talked about how they offered a lot of pictures that can mean kind of the same emotion to different people, but here the third picture is the farthest from worrisome. And those who chose this picture also chose a low scale on whether or not they experienced gentle versus non-gentle. So that kind of, in conclusion, means that for at least this test is that those who experienced non-gentle parenting also chose the farthest picture from showing the correct emotion. Here the emotion is calm, and it's kind of the same thing here as well. The correct answer here is the third picture. The two pictures with answers, obviously, because no one else chose the first or the fourth picture, so that's why we just have some data for the second and third. This kind of makes sense too, because I feel like the second and third picture both kind of represent some calmness. So that's why this data is kind of it's kind of normally distributed. So those who chose 7 for having gentle parents on the scale had the highest percentage of choosing the correct answer, which is the third picture. And those who chose intervals from like 2 to 6, they chose the wrong answer, but understandably so, because again, I said the pictures are very similar. All in all, majority of those who said that their parents practiced gentle parenting chose the best option. So this kind of supports my equation or claim that gentle parenting makes you more empathetic. So with some confidence intervals based on this data, participants that said that they had one parent or guardian raise them had more of a chance of experiencing a gentle parenting style with a 68% chance, and then 33% with none. But at the same time, people who also said they had 2 active parents or guardians with a gentle approach was the majority, but it was a 57%. So I would say that here there is no correlation between whether or not having 1 or 2 active parents in a household makes you either have gentle parenting or non-gentle parenting styles. So here there is no correlation, but I kind of wanted to talk about that because it also makes sense because the p-value is above 0.05. So the confidence intervals for this one as well, this is basically the overall evaluation of whether or not they believe their parents did gentle parenting, or one of the eye tests, the last eye test. Is what's interesting here is that the data shows that those who choose an interval that overall evaluated their upbringing as gentle chose the first 2 pictures determining the emotions portrayed by the eyes, but none chose the last image, which the last image was wrong. Those who chose non-gentle intervals chose the last image to portray the emotion calmness, which in turn is not the correct option. So here, again, there's other participants that were considered non-gentle, that or experienced non-gentle parenting, but they chose either the first or the second picture, which were close to correct answers. But 100% of people who chose the last picture were all non-gentle people, and that was the most incorrect picture. So another confidence interval is basically number of parents in the household and whether or not they took time for themselves. So what's interesting in the relationship between how many parents or guardians were present and if the adults made sure to take time for themselves is that participants that chose 6 for personal time, meaning that they believe that their parents, for most of the time, took more time for themselves. Single-parent homes took more time for themselves over 2-parent homes, which in my opinion is quite surprising because I believe that, or at least this is just what I believe, that single-parent homes would tend to not have as much alone time or me time as they should, rather than 2-parent homes because they don't have that extra help as, again, married couples do. So overall, there's no obvious statistical relationship between active parents in the household and if they take time for themselves, because here you can see that the range was from 2 to 7, and there was a lot of answers that kind of range in between. So there is no significant difference between single-family homes and married on whether or not they took time for themselves. So some key takeaways I have: the idea of gentle parenting has become sort of a trend the last couple of years, and that's why I started to follow a couple of moms on social media, and they strongly believed in their parenting styles. So that's kind of what lighted this fire, I guess, with this research. One in particular, Ellen Fisher, has 3 children and continuously talk about her parenting practices and what she's found helpful. Personally, I've noticed her children tend to have better manners, more positive outlook on life, natural kindness, and overall more peaceful and empathetic personality. It's quite impressive to me that her children range from age 1 to age 6, and I have never seen more peaceful and loving and just kind children to all kinds of people and animals, etc. Before. And with that said, I know social media is a hard medium to measure certain things from considering most people choose to post the good stuff rather than the bad stuff. So I'm not saying her children are perfect, or they don't have temper tantrums, or they don't have normal outbursts like children do. But she is very good about being pretty transparent, and she does videotape and post when they have meltdowns and when they have brotherly fights or whatever it is, and she has problems with her husband. But she talks about how she gets through them through gentle parenting, and that is more addressing the emotions rather than consequences. And I think that's why I chose to research this, and because I wanted to see if gentle parenting really did have an effect on if they were more empathetic or peaceful or not. So overall, the conclusion from the information I provided, I believe there are some key takeaways we conclude from gentle parenting. The overall evaluation of whether or not their emotions were validated and given attention to first over addressing their bad actions or consequences ended up believing that their parents practiced more of a gentle parenting. So I think children in general value being validated and given attention, especially when they have emotional situations, rather than just giving or getting consequences for their bad actions. I think there's something behind those bad actions, and that's what you have to address rather than just addressing the physical bad action. The data also shows that 70% of the participants concluded that their parents practice non-gentle practices with discipline by yelling, spanking, timeout, etc. I think this is the most obvious kind of conclusion we can get. Obviously, people are not going to think that they're gentle by spanking, yelling. Gentle parenting styles practice more of you discipline them if they do something wrong by explaining why it's wrong, telling them, I understand you're upset, or I understand that this, and this, you're feeling this way. This is how we should act, and this is how we will act next time. But there is no physical or isolating discipline. 60% of responses concluded they received rewards for good behavior, therefore practicing non-gentle parenting style. I wanted to kind of touch on this a little bit more. Not getting rewards does not mean the child is not praised for good behavior. It just is believed that the child should not expect ice cream or candy or any type of reward if he or she does something good. It should become the normal to behave well and in turn receive no consequences. That is the reward, is receiving no consequences. We don't want to enable good behavior just because they think they're going to get something out of it. It should just become the normal, and that's what gentle parenting kind of practices. Alone time for the parents is crucial to how parenting children can be easy or difficult. I believe the generation sampled grew up with parents knowing that their own time and energy is just as important, or in fact more important, for the wellness of the child. Therefore, majority of the responses concluded that their parents did take time for themselves, which in turn means gentle parenting. One conclusion that is interesting is forced affection. Majority of the responses, about 70%, recorded that their parents forced them to say thank you, give hugs or kisses, etc. to family or friends, even if the child did not want to. This is considered non-gentle due to the fact that the child was not given a choice whether or not he or she wanted to do this. But I also wanted to focus on this as well. Forcing the child to say thank you is considered non-gentle, but that does not mean that gentle parenting practices no manners. It just means that when raising a child, you teach them to be thankful for things people do for them, not the empty thank yous a lot of children give off just because their parents tell them it's the right thing to do. Again, if you teach children to value and respect people's emotions and feelings, that they're naturally going to be thankful for when people do things for them. It shouldn't have to be told all the time. So overall, I want to say thank you to Professor G for allowing me to open my mind to all marketing research has to offer. I really didn't realize how wrong a lot of common practices we use for research were until kind of taking your class, and I strongly believe that once I start my real world job, I will luckily be able to use unbiased, correct information for any research I have. So thank you, and peace and blessings.